oh, look at the numbers here, look at the sales here. And that's obviously so important, right? That's our job. That's in our job titles. I understand that. But if that person is unhappy and there is something that is not going well, whether it's in their personal life or their professional life, and you're unaware of that, again, the sales will follow when your people are happy. I truly believe that.
Welcome, my lovely people, to yet another fabulous episode of the B2B Sales Trends podcast. Now, today's topic is really interesting. I want you to think about what happens when a sales leader realizes that two people wearing the same job title can be driven by completely different things. What happens when coaching stops being about the role and starts being about the human sitting in front of you? Now, that's the world of Courtney Tranberg. Courtney is an area sales manager at Smith+Nephews, and she's leading teams that stretch from recent graduates to industry veterans with decades under their belt. Now, she's figuring out in real time how to guide these people through who think a little bit differently, learn differently, and are motivated by wildly different things. And her philosophy is really simple. Their goals are not the same, their motivations are not the same, and their treatment, therefore, should not be the same. And in this episode, we explore how great leaders adapt, listen, coach the individual, and not the template. Welcome, Courtney, to the B2B Sales Trends podcast.
Thank you, Harry. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Let's talk a little bit about you to kick this off with. Before we get into the leadership side of things, for our listeners that meet you for the first time, how do you describe the world you lead in at Smith+Nephew? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, hello, everybody. Thanks again for having me. I started with Smith+Nephew as a 1099 sales rep right out of college. So I was 23 years old. I was a rep for about 6 years, covering all kinds of divisions. And then about 3.5 years ago, got into the leadership and management side of things, which has been a blast. But as Harry mentioned, very quick to realize that not everyone is treated the same, and we need to treat everyone a little bit different to accomplish what we need to do. So it's been a long journey those last 3.5 years and a few changes, but I now cover the Northern Nevada and Northern California territories at Smith+Nephew.
Thank you. I appreciate that introduction, Courtney. Now, moving from a rep to a manager is one of those sort of shifts that people really underestimate. It's not just a new title, it's a complete different role, as a complete different identity, so to speak. Take us back when you stepped into leadership and what caught you sort of off guard about leading people versus selling.
Yeah, so many things, honestly. I think the biggest piece that I realized very quickly is not everyone was the same as me, which sounds so selfish that I thought everyone worked the same as me. Everybody was motivated by the same things. We all do the same things, but it is so opposite of that. And I did realize as a rep, everyone sold a little different, but I didn't realize how different we were as far as motivation goes, trying to accomplish the same goals.
Interesting. Something I've noticed in great leaders is the following. They eventually realize that two reps with the same job description can be motivated by completely different things. Mm-hmm. When did that realization hit you?
The biggest one that I can remember, I guess the first one, was when I first took over one specific territory, and it was one of my first territories that I was taking over in Northern California. And I was so excited, still had, the bright-eyed, bushy-tail feeling of this is going to be awesome, this is going to be great. So a lot of that going on was my attitude. But when I got to the territory, the attitude, it was only actually one rep at this time because the rest of the team had quit. And she was just everything was on fire all the time. And I don't know how she kept it together the way she did. It was incredible. She didn't quit and just up and leave. But that was definitely the point where I realized, one, we need to change what we're doing, and then finding out why did these other people leave. And so during that trip, when I went out there, I met with one of the reps who had left, and he had given me all these reasons why he left. His motivations were so different than what hers were, trying to keep the territory afloat. So when I went into hiring for that territory is when I really realized we need to pull the different strengths of different people to
Mm.
accomplish our goal out there.
That's interesting. That's an interesting thought, and we've seen a lot of different coaching moments in a way. We always say
Mhm.
sales leaders really need to be taking advantage of these coaching moments that happen throughout the sales process. But most of the time, the most powerful sort of coaching moments usually happen not in a loud way, in a very obvious way. They happen quietly. They're often a messy, sort of everyday situation that no one else sees. Can you share a moment where, tailoring your coaching to one specific individual made a real difference in their performance?
Yeah, going back to that same scenario and that same territory, you're absolutely right, Harry. It was in the car as we were running to a case that I realized, like, that light bulb went off in my head of we need to fix this. And talking to her and just listening to her was the biggest piece. And then as we did start hiring out there, just developing those reps in those individuals and again playing into their strengths is really what changed my thought process. That team is a great example for me to keep falling back on because of how I saw it start and then what it is now. It truly is it's incredible what they've done.
It's interesting, and I know from our pre-call that your sort of breadth of different people that you are coaching and on your team. I mean, there are people in their early 20s and people in their 60s. That's really a big gap or a range, shall I say, in communication styles, expectations, life experience, and so forth. How do you adjust your coaching approach without feeling like you're changing who you are in a way?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's so funny to see all of the different personalities because I was trained by reps who are still doing it, right? And they're in their 60s and they don't need my help to sell. They know the product better than I probably ever will. It's incredible, right? Their knowledge level is impressive. And then the younger ones, it's I feel I can get a little bit more perspective when it comes to product training and things like that. But just like you said, different life situations make it very different. I
Mm.
don't change who I am, but I do change how I present myself or I guess talk to people because I wanna stay very genuine. I never wanna pretend like, "Oh, I can do this or I can do that," when I can't. I wanna make sure that I'm staying true, and I know when there's somebody else I mean, we have all the time. We have a feed going 24/7 of people sending X-rays, and I know there are people in that group chat that know far more better what to do in that moment for that surgery, what implant is already in there than I know. So sometimes I just sit back, listen, and let somebody else chime in, and that's the best way to coach that team at that time is, excuse me, allowing somebody else to come in and fix the problem because they know better than I do.
Right. And we mentioned that there are people who have sort of, in a way, been there, done that, seen it all, sort of people that you're going to have to coach to, or that you will coach. What did you learn from them and in those situations, from especially around earning their respect, to be coached by somebody who may not be as long in the game as they have?
Yeah, respect is the biggest piece of what you said there, and earning that respect early on is important. Again, I think when some managers, especially young managers, come into these roles, they think that they know everything. Well, I was put in this role for a reason, right? That arrogance steps in. For me, I've taken the approach of, okay, I know you don't need me to do your job. You've been doing your job for 20, 30 years without me, but what can I take off your plate to make your job easier? And there's quite a few of the reps on my team. Again, they've been doing this longer than I've been alive. So I'm not going to come in and shake up what they're doing. But if I can add some kind of benefit to make their life easier, which will then allow our sales to grow because they don't have to do this particular task, that's what we want to do as a team. So our goals are the same. It's just how we get there is a little bit different.
Right. Interesting. Now, obviously, you're in the med device industry, and one of the key issues is obviously navigating a buying landscape
Hmm.
within your customers' organizations, and that's one thing that we hear all the time across med device organizations is the sense that hospitals and hospital buying functions have, in a way, their own unique evolving maze of stakeholders.
Hmm.
And what comes along with that is, of course, approval processes and approval steps. Tell us a little bit about an experience or a moment that you had when you and a rep had to navigate that maze in real time, and how did you as a coach and the coachee deal with those situations?
Yeah, a couple examples come to mind, but it is so important to treat the hospital systems, even if it's a large IDN,
Mm,
like it's an individual, right? Because even if you're looking at one healthcare system that's massive, they may internally operate differently. So just recently, we actually had this come up, and I'm still working to get through the approval process and that kind of thing because it's a hospital we've never had the opportunity to work at before. And we have the surgeon support. We feel lucky that we do have that because the surgeon wants to use our product. However, we do need to make sure that we are following all of the rules internally. So with that particular rep, it's going in there physically with them, asking the questions. What do we need to do so this is approved? Showing them, okay, you don't just need pricing in place, you need to have all the differentiating factors, all of the sterilization techniques, and really just having them along for the ride. That's how I was coached to start. And I had my boss at the time who led my team as a rep just said, okay, you're going to come in this meeting and you're going to shut up. You're just going to sit here and listen. And I learned so much from doing that because I could just listen and hear what the conversation is. So I try to replicate that with my team now.
interesting. And in those kind of situations, sometimes this can be difficult for reps or for even leaders, right? Because
Mhm.
everybody typically in that room is a decision maker until you find out that there aren't, right? And so, how do you coach your reps to cut through that noise and really identify who actually holds, the cards or the pen to be able to
Mhm.
make decisions here?
Yeah, Smith+Nephew does a really good job teaching on the commercial leadership side on figuring out, like you said, who are just the talkers and who are the mobilizers, right? The people who are actually going to make it happen. And so when I'm coaching my reps, it's having them ask those questions instead of them coming to me, which happens every week.
Mm,
I'm so excited to have this opportunity. We're going to be great. It's that excitement. But then you're
mm,
asking, okay, who did you talk to? And it's like, oh, somebody who really isn't going to help make that decision. Although that person may support you, they're not going to be the one that signs off on your brilliant idea. So for me, having them ask those questions on, okay, what are the next step? When are they trying to have this done by? What are their goals? And you can really kind of get through the weeds on who's going to actually help you get there and who's just kind of saying, okay, great job. You got this.
uh, yeah, yeah, and and ask also not just those questions, I think, but also ask those thought-provoking questions of
Hmm.
really engaging with those different stakeholders. Because it's one thing to talk with somebody who likes our stuff, right,
Right.
and thinks it's great, but it's a different matter to really engage them based on the outcomes it's can provided to them. and how they can run their hospital or business better. Now, for leaders listening to this, Courtney, who want to, tap into what you've said and really implement it and want to start individualizing their coaching, uh, not in a few weeks, but maybe in the coming days, what's the first conversation they should be having, and what common mistakes should they be avoiding early on in those conversations?
Having the conversation is the most important piece. And what I have found is a lot of people get put into a leadership position and they just kind of leave it at that. So they're not having these follow-up conversations. It's okay, I'm going to, call this rep or they call me, so it's fine. But really, if you take the time to sit down and go to coffee, go to happy hour, whatever it looks like, right? To say, hey, I'm listening to you, that I think is the most important piece. I mean, I find that when I do that with my team, and I talk to my team all the time, right? It's so important to have that contact and that open door policy. But if you're not giving them the time set aside, that's, hey, now what do you need from me? I think that's step one, is finding the time. Step two is asking just what I said. What do you need from me? How can I make your life better?
Right.
hmm And as far as what is a mistake, I think we go back to, oh, look at the numbers here, look at the sales here. And that's obviously so important, right? That's our job. That's in our job titles. I understand that. But if that person is unhappy and there is something that is not going well, whether it's in their personal life or their professional life, and you're unaware of that, again, the sales will follow when your people are happy. I truly believe that.
We see a lot of the times that the salespeople who've been promoted to sort of a managerial coaching role, they tend to be, promoted because they were really good salespeople and sort of the natural progression in their next sort of career path, right? Career step. Now, being an excellent manager or being an excellent salesperson, that's very, very different. Um, what is it, if you can have two tips for somebody who's just moved up to from a sales perspective, from a sales position to a managerial level, what would that be in your opinion, beyond there just start and have the conversation?
Yeah, definitely step and have the conversation as we talked
Right.
about, but taking the time to start looking at your team as individuals, but also as a big picture, right? So what I mean by that is you have each person that is going to contribute individually, right? You have each person that has their strengths, but then how can each of these strengths, like that example I talked about earlier, is a good example of, okay, we have one person here. This is her personality. What kind of personality and what kind of strengths do we need on this team to make it successful? And really individualizing it from that perspective while you're looking at what the territory needs as a whole would be one point there. And then I just can't get out of my head. Make time for your team. That's the biggest piece. And I know we talked about that, but it's so important to just grab a coffee. I never want when I call one of my team members for them to get that like, oh, scary moment of, why am
Yeah.
I calling? What's going on? I want it to be very normal and make sure that they know that I'm there for them. It's not just, oh, you're in trouble and your numbers are low, so I'm calling you now, right? So those two things I'd say are most important.
Why do you think that sales leaders or coaches don't coach? Because we hear all the time from sales organizations who have a bunch of leaders, a bunch of managers. We always hear from senior level leadership, oh, my managers don't coach. We need
Mhm.
something to help them coach. Why do you think they don't coach?
I do think some come into the role, like you said, they were great reps and then they just kind of get thrown into this role. There's a lot of admin work. There's a lot of, you have to go over pricing and approvals and compliance training and rep training. There's so many other things that I think we forget about the people on the ground in the field doing it every day. So I don't know if it's necessarily as they don't want to coach, as they don't really know where to start. And
Mm.
for me, I think I really genuinely just care so much about my team. That part came naturally. And then when I have to actually sit behind and look at a spreadsheet for hours, I'm like, okay, my mind starts wandering. But the people part of it, again, is so important because if they're doing well and you're giving them what they need, feeding the beast, if you will, that's what needs to happen for the sales to grow.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Most leaders sort of point to a specific moment when their style shifted from this is what I'm going to tell my people what to do to truly understand who they are. What was that
Mhm.
moment for you?
I don't know if there was one moment because trying to tell a bunch of trauma reps what to do would never work, right? You're kind of like, okay, I'll tell you to do something, but if that respect isn't there and that relationship isn't there, you haven't built the foundation, nobody's going to do it, So I like to think that it's been a compilation of moments of getting to know my people. Now I ask them to do certain things that it's like, okay, hey, you haven't done your compliance training. Can you do this? It's been due for 30 days now, right? Whatever it is. And they're more willing to do it because they know me and I don't ask them to do these one off things all the time. So I wouldn't say it's a moment. I'd say it's kind of a compilation, like I said, of getting to know everybody slowly.
Love it. Let's fast forward. We live in an extremely fast-paced world right now, right? Let's take a quick peek into the future. Let's get our crystal ball out, right? And take a quick look. If we were to meet again in 5 years from now, uh, what do you think would surprise us most about how med device reps sell or how leaders coach?
I do think there are so many avenues you can go with coaching. There's so many books you can read and trainings you can do. So I would imagine that is only going to increase. I like what you said earlier about it really depending on the outcomes and that's what matters. So I think if we take more of that direction and pay more attention to what our end user needs, whether that's our surgeons or hospitals, really focusing on the goal will be in a better place. But I think it might be a little bit more difficult to get there because of all of these books and resources and trainings coming out. It could be good because you're taking a little bit and making it, I always say, your own soup, what works for you. But I do think it might be harder to navigate what's actually working too. So it'll be interesting to see in 5 years. I can imagine a lot of change going on.
Fabulous, fabulous. Um, are you up for a quick fire round?
Ready? Shoot.
Good. Couple of questions for you. Uh, what's the one habit that keeps you grounded in when you have busy days or chaotic days in a way? What's that one habit that you keep reverting back to that keeps you grounded?
I am still trying to find what that habit is, Harry, if I'm being honest. I don't know yet. I've really gone in waves with this. I think the simple deep breath is great. Just give me a moment to clear my thoughts really quick. I think going to the gym regularly helps, but can you get there regularly? Absolutely not, right? I manage trauma reps. There's something going on at all times. So, although I try and have been pretty consistent, that's difficult. But at the end of the day, I'd say remembering why I'm doing it and having those little moments of whenever one of our reps does something that's really cool or covers their first case or wins a challenge, we're doing something like that. And those reps are so excited. It brings me back to my why. Okay, this is what I want to do. And that definitely keeps me grounded, sharing those moments with the team.
What if you had to describe modern sales leadership in one word? What would that be?
Evolving, like we talked about. I think there's always change going on. I think we haven't quite figured it out, which is why there's so many different resources out there. So I love having all of the resources, the podcasts, listening to you guys in the podcast. You can learn something from everyone. So I would say it's always changing. Evolving would be my word.
Fantastic. My last question for today is the last question I always ask on every podcast, is the question of what, in your opinion, are the top three skills or behaviors that elite sales reps need to possess these days?
Mm. Work ethic is huge. I think when I'm interviewing, I find that the job sounds very cool and people think, "Oh, you're in surgery and you work with surgeons, you're in the operating room." But it's not that cool behind the scenes, right? I love what we do, but there's so much work that goes into it. So I would say bringing it back to work ethic and how hard do you really want to work, because all those things are cool, but there's a lot that goes on beyond that. And then let's see, somebody who's driven. And
Right.
what that looks like is different, like we talked about, for everyone. So discovering that with your team pretty quickly is important. But somebody who wants to, whether it's cover a certain amount of cases, cover a revision case, whatever their motivation is, they have to have something, right? If it's making X amount of money, whatever it is, they have to be motivated by something. Because if they're not, they just kind of mope around.
Right.
And then third, let me think. I I do think this sounds very cliche, and it might be kind of lame to say, but just the positivity, right? Coming in with a positive attitude. Again, it sounds cliche, but if you come in every day thinking you're going to do something better, you're going to have a positive attitude, you will be more successful than the people that come in just kind of slumped over every day, right? You really need to have that, especially in this job. I always say you need to love it, because if you don't, it is not worth any of the money. It's definitely not worth the time you're putting in. It's awful. It's so much work. So I think those three things are probably the most important. You have to love it and be positive about it.
So evolving as a leader, always progressing and evolving in your coaching and leadership conversations and in your approach. And for salespeople, it's really the work ethic, being driven by good outcomes, and the positivity. Courtney, this was fabulous. Very much appreciate your insights. I know our listeners will do so as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you all so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, lovely people, what stayed with me from this conversation with Courtney wasn't just about her approach to coaching. For me, it was a lot about her honesty about what it takes to truly lead humans. She reminded me a little bit that two people doing the same job may need completely different things in a different approach, an evolving approach, for example. And that real leadership is the willingness to slow down, listen, and meet people where they are. It's not about perfection, it's about presence and evolving your approach. These are the conversations that pull us back to what matters in sales: trust, curiosity, and the courage to adapt. If you like this episode and it sparked a couple of things within you, share this with a leader or share this with a colleague who you think may be benefiting from the great things Courtney said today. So subscribe also to the podcast b2bsalestrends.com or our YouTube channel. As always, look after yourself, look after your loved ones, and of course, your B2B customers. Bye bye.